There are those moments, small and almost unforgettable, when something in your spirit says something is off. Just a tiny tug that gives you a pause, or it makes you ponder and question why the energy in the room suddenly feels different. Maybe it was a shift in the tone that didn't match the words that were being spoken. A pause that lingered a tad bit too long, or a feeling you tried to dismiss, but it just won't go away. That feeling you feel in your chest, in your gut, is the beginning of a truth we often don't want to face. Because before the confusion, before the heartbreak, before the unraveling, there is always a sign, a warning, a red flag. Hey everybody, it's your girl Coach G, your certified transformational coach with a master's in psychology and a PhD in life. And my goal is simple: to help you change your perspective. Because when you look at things through a clear lens, your mindset shifts, your choices change, and your entire life starts moving in a new direction. We're beginning a brand new series on red flags in relationships. And the goal of this series is to help you understand the behaviors that signal emotional unavailability, inconsistency, or lack of genuine intention. And many of these patterns are easily overlooked because they often resemble the dynamics you may have grown up in or around. And when that structure is your foundation, certain behaviors seem minuscule and may not register as concerning. By the end of this series, you will be able to separate familiarity from compatibility and evaluate behaviors based on facts rather than habits. We're going to look at what people show you, how they show it, and why it matters for your emotional wellness. So let's get into it. When we talk about red flags in relationships, we're talking about observable behaviors that indicate a lack of emotional readiness, a lack of relational consistency, or a lack of genuine intention. And these behaviors are not always dramatic. Most of the time, they're subtle patterns that become clearer over time. And the purpose of this series is to help you understand these patterns in a factual and grounded way so you can make decisions based on what is actually happening rather than what you hope will happen. So, what is a red flag? Simply put, it's a behavioral indicator. It's that information that contradicts the requirements of a healthy relationship. And in talking about healthy relationships, I'm talking about those elements that are required to sustain a healthy relationship, like reliability, being able to communicate with each other, taking accountability for your actions, and being emotionally available for each other. That being said, when someone repeatedly demonstrates the opposite of these qualities, that behavior is a red flag. Many people struggle to recognize red flags because they were raised in environments where inconsistency or emotional imbalance was normalized. And so when you grow up adapting to instability, you learn to tolerate it, you learn to adjust, and you learn to make these workarounds. And that conditioning becomes familiar, and familiarity can override logic. One of the most common reasons people overlook red flags is because they focus on emotional connection rather than behavioral evidence. Attraction and chemistry tend to create a sense of optimism that interferes with objective judgment. And when you want a relationship to work, you interpret behavior through the lens of desire rather than through the lens of reality. You minimize what you see, you rationalize what you feel, and you assume improvement will happen, which is a mistake. This is not a flaw, it is a predictable human response to emotional attachment. And another factor that influences how people, especially women, respond to red flags is the structure of the household that they grew up in. I was researching some information when I came across the term matrifocal. This term is relevant in that the matrifocal household was where the mother was seen as the central stabilizing figure of the house, the person who carried the most emotional and practical and relational responsibilities. And this was brought on by historical and economic conditions. So growing up in these type of structures shape how many of us learn to function in relationships. For instance, as a child, if you see one person carrying most of the emotional weight, you learn that responsibility is normal. You learn to be self-sufficient as well as anticipate needs of other people around you. You learn to adjust to the inconsistent male presence because that is what you have been exposed to. This doesn't mean dad was some bum or alcoholic or whatever, that he didn't do anything for the family. A lot of these households were healthy. It just means that the emotional roles were unfair. And so as a child, you internalize those roles. And as adults raised in matrifocal environments, you can unconsciously repeat those dynamics in your romantic relationships. You may choose a partner who requires guidance. You might have to motivate them or emotional regulate them because that role feels familiar. You might feel that their growth or their success is your responsibility or to help them change their bad habits. You believe your self worth is somehow connected to how much you can contribute or how much you can fix things. And this is how many women end up in relationships where he's lackadaisical while they're doing the majority of the emotional labor. It's not because they lack awareness, it is because they were conditioned to operate in that role. So understanding the metrofocal conditioning helps explain why we ignore certain red flags, why we don't, why those red flags don't register as problems. Because if you grew up watching a woman carry the household, you may not see a partner's lack of initiative as a warning sign. You may interpret it as something you can manage. If you grew up watching a woman handle emotional conflict alone, you may not see avoidance as a red flag. You may see it as something you can work around. And if you grew up watching a woman compensate for inconsistency, you may not see inconsistency as a necessary deal breaker, but instead you see it as something you can fix. So, what do? You grab all your emotional tools and you get to work. This is why recognizing red flags is not simply about one's intelligence or one's strength. It's a matter of understanding your conditioning. Why do you think the way you do? Why do you always feel you have to be the one to do the heavy lifting in a relationship? Why do you play the fixer? When somebody says one thing and does another, or is inconsistent, doesn't communicate, or take accountability, that is information. And these behaviors don't require interpretation, they require acknowledgement. These are learned behaviors. Learned behaviors that you can unlearn and start making informed decisions based not on your emotions, but on compatibility. Hey everybody, this is your girl Coach G again. Thank you for tuning in this morning. While I've given you what I call an introductory to this new series, I hope this conversation is off to a good start for you. Listen, this was short, but full of information. We're just getting started, so hang in there with me. I promise you, you won't leave this series like you came. Next week, we're going straight into our next segment, whiplash, when his words don't match his ways. So meet me right back here next Wednesday at 6 a.m. And until then, take care of your heart, trust your gut, and I'll see you next week.